Marie Curie was born Maria Skłodowska in Warsaw in 1867 under the shadow of the Russian Empire. Poland did not exist on any map. It had been divided, occupied, erased. To be Polish was to be invisible, or worse, to be watched. Schools were controlled. Books were burned. Speaking Polish in public was an act of defiance. Learning was an act of resistance. Her father was a teacher. He lost his job for refusing to teach Russian propaganda. The family was poor. They moved often. Maria slept in small rooms with her siblings. She read by candlelight. She memorized math problems while walking to school. She never forgot a formula. She never forgot a sleight. Her mother died of tuberculosis when Maria was 10. She did not cry at the funeral. She stood still, silent, watching. Her sisters cried. Her father cried. Maria did not. It was the first time people noticed her stillness. It would not be the last. The apartment where Maria grew up was crowded. 5 children, 2 adults, not enough space, not enough heat in winter. Her father sold furniture to pay for food. He sold his wife's jewelry after she died. Maria watched him count coins at the kitchen table night after night, deciding what they could afford. Bread, candles, books, always books, even when there was barely money for bread. She wanted to study at the university, but women were not allowed. In Warsaw, women could not attend lectures. They could not take exams. They could not exist in the academic world, so she taught herself. She joined a secret school, the Flying University, where women met in basements and attics to study science, philosophy, and literature. It was illegal. If caught, they would be arrested. Maria did not care. The Flying University changed locations every week. Someone would pass a note with an address. You would go there after dark. You would climb narrow stairs to an attic or descend into a cellar. There would be 15, maybe 20 women sitting on the floor, notebooks in their laps. A professor, usually older, someone who had been dismissed from the official university for political reasons, would teach chemistry, physics, literature, history that was not approved by the Russian censors. Maria attended every lecture she could. She took notes in tiny handwriting to save paper. She borrowed textbooks and copied entire chapters by hand because she could not afford to buy them. She memorized everything. She had always had a remarkable memory. Numbers, formulas, entire paragraphs of text. Once she read something, it stayed with her. But she could not stay in Warsaw. There was no future for her there. No university would accept her. No laboratory would hire her. She needed to leave. Her sister Branya had already gone to Paris to study medicine. Maria wanted to follow, but there was no money. She saved money for years. She worked as a governess in the countryside, teaching the children of wealthy families. She lived in their houses. She ate their food. She taught their sons and daughters mathematics, languages, science. She sent most of her salary to Branya. The plan was simple. Branya would finish her studies first, then help Maria. It took 6 years. Maria was patient. She always was. During those years in the countryside, Maria was desperately lonely. She wrote letters to her family. She described the long winter evenings, the endless flat landscape, the boredom. She was surrounded by people who did not care about the things she cared about: science, ideas, learning. They cared about land, money, marriages. She felt invisible again, but she did not quit. She needed the money, so she stayed. In one of the houses where she worked, she fell in love. The family had an older son, a university student. He was studying mathematics. He and Maria talked for hours. They walked in the garden. They made plans. He would finish his degree. They would marry. His family would accept her eventually. But when he told his parents, they refused. She was a governess. She was poor. She was nobody. The son did not fight for her. He accepted his parents' decision. Maria left. She never spoke about him again. In 1891, she left Warsaw. She took a train to Paris. She was 24. She had almost nothing. A small trunk with a few dresses, some books, a coat. She crossed the border at night, Poland behind her, the rest of her life ahead. She enrolled at the Sorbonne under the name Marie. It was easier than trying to pronounce Skłodowska. She rented a room in the Latin Quarter on the 6th floor of a building with no elevator and no heat. In winter, the water in her basin froze overnight. She wrapped herself in all the clothes she owned and studied until dawn. The room was barely larger than a closet, a narrow bed, a small table, a chair, a lamp, that was all. She could hear the people in the neighboring rooms through the thin walls, conversations, arguments, music. She ignored it all. She read her textbooks. She worked through problem sets. She did not socialize. She did not have time. She attended lectures in physics and mathematics. She sat in the front row. She took notes in Polish, then translated them into French. Her French was improving, but it was still difficult. Technical terms, complex grammar. She missed things sometimes, so she studied twice as hard to make up for it. She ate very little: bread, chocolate, sometimes a piece of fruit. She budgeted carefully, but there was never enough money. She skipped meals. She grew thin. Sometimes she fainted in the middle of the street. She would wake up on the sidewalk, people staring at her, asking if she was all right. She would say yes. She would go home. She would drink water and eat a piece of bread. Then she would return to her books. One winter she fainted in the library. A friend found her and brought her to Branya's apartment. Branya was furious. She saw how thin Marie was, how pale. She made her stay for a week. She fed her. She made her rest. Then Marie went back to her tiny room on the 6th floor. Branya tried to make her stay. Marie refused. She needed to be alone. She needed to study. She graduated first in her class in physics. First. In a room full of men who had been studying at universities their entire lives, who had never worked as governesses, who had never gone hungry, who had never been told they could not learn. She graduated first. The second year, she graduated second in mathematics. No one knew her name. She preferred it that way. After graduating, she was offered a research position. It paid almost nothing, but it gave her access to a laboratory. She was studying the magnetic properties of different types of steel. It was tedious work, measuring, recording, repeating, but she did not mind. She liked the precision of it. She liked the silence of the laboratory. She liked being left alone to work. In 1894, she met Pierre Curie. He was 8 years older, a physicist known for his work on crystals and magnetism. He was quiet like her. He did not attend parties. He did not seek recognition. He lived with his parents and spent his evenings in the laboratory. Someone introduced them at a scientific gathering. They spoke about magnetism. They did not speak about anything else. Marie needed better equipment for her work. The laboratory she was using was inadequate. Pierre had access to a better space at the School of Industrial Physics and Chemistry where he taught. He offered to let her work there. She accepted. They worked side by side. They did not speak unless necessary. It was the most comfortable silence either of them had ever known. Pierre had been engaged once years earlier. The engagement ended. He never explained why. After that, he decided he would not marry. He would dedicate his life to science. Then he met Marie. He changed his mind. He wrote to her long letters. He told her he admired her mind. He told her he had never met anyone like her. He told her he wanted to spend his life working beside her. Marie did not know what to say. She had never thought about marriage. She had always thought she would return to Poland. She would teach. Maybe start a school for women. Marriage was not part of the plan. Pierre proposed. Marie refused. She told him she was returning to Poland. She had always planned to return. She would teach there, maybe start a school for women. Pierre wrote her more letters. He told her he would move to Poland if she wanted. He would learn Polish. He would give up his position in Paris. He would follow her. Marie did not answer for weeks. She went back to Warsaw. She looked for teaching positions, but nothing had changed. Women were still not allowed to teach at universities. She could work as a governess again. She could teach in a private school for girls, but that was all. She would never have access to a laboratory. She would never be able to do research. She realized she had to choose, Poland or science. She could not have both. She returned to Paris. She wrote to Pierre. She said yes. They married in July 1895 in a small civil ceremony. Marie wore a dark blue dress. She would wear it in the laboratory for years afterward. There were no flowers, no church, no guests beyond family. They spent their honeymoon on bicycles, riding through the French countryside. They brought notebooks. Their marriage was unusual. They did not live like other married couples. They worked all day in the laboratory. They came home late. They ate simple meals. They read scientific papers in bed. They discussed experiments. They disagreed sometimes. Pierre would suggest one approach. Marie would suggest another. They would test both. Whoever was right would win. It was not personal, it was scientific. Marie was happy. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Pierre understood her. He did not expect her to be anything other than what she was. He did not ask her to give up her work. He encouraged it. He made space for it. She had never had that before. In 1896, Henry Becquerel discovered something strange. He was studying phosphorescence, the way certain materials glow after being exposed to light. He placed uranium salts on photographic plates, wrapped in black paper, and left them in a drawer. Days later, when he developed the plates, they were fogged. The uranium had emitted something. Not light, something else. He called it radiation. He did not know what it was. Marie read about Becquerel's discovery. She was looking for a topic for her doctoral thesis. Women were not usually allowed to pursue doctorates, but the rules were beginning to shift, slowly, reluctantly. Marie decided to study this new radiation. Pierre supported her. He gave her access to a storage room at the School of Industrial Physics and Chemistry where he taught. It was cold. It was damp. It leaked when it rained. Marie did not complain. The storage room was on the ground floor. It had been used to store old equipment and broken furniture. Pierre cleared it out. Marie set up a workbench. She brought in an electrometer, the device Pierre and his brother had invented to measure electrical charges. She began testing different materials to see if they emitted radiation. She tested uranium. She tested thorium. She tested compounds, minerals, ores. She worked methodically, recording every result in a notebook. She measured the ionization of air caused by the radiation. It was slow work. Each sample had to be prepared carefully. Each measurement had to be repeated multiple times to ensure accuracy. Marie did not mind. She liked the repetition. She liked the precision. She noticed something unexpected. Pitchblende, a heavy black ore that contained uranium, was far more radioactive than pure uranium. It should not have been. The radiation should have come only from the uranium. But the pitchblende was 4 times more radioactive than the uranium it contained. The only explanation was that pitchblende contained another element, something unknown, something more powerful than uranium. Marie was certain. Pierre was skeptical. He had learned to be cautious. Most extraordinary claims in science turned out to be measurement errors or wishful thinking, but Marie insisted. She showed him the data. She repeated the measurements. The results were consistent. Pierre tested the samples himself. He stopped being skeptical. They decided to work together. Pierre abandoned his own research on crystals. He joined Marie in the storage room. They began the long process of isolating the unknown element. It would take years. It would consume their lives. It would nearly kill them both. Pitchblende was expensive. They could not afford it, so they bought the waste. After uranium was extracted from pitchblende for industrial use, the remaining material was thrown away. It was considered worthless. Marie and Pierre bought tons of it cheap from a mine in Austria. It arrived in sacks, dumped in the courtyard of the school. Marie sorted through it by hand. The process was brutal. They dissolved the ore in acid, boiled it, filtered it, crystallized it, dissolved it again. Each step concentrated the radioactive material and removed the other elements. But the process was inefficient. They lost material at every stage. They had to start over, again and again, with fresh batches of pitchblende. Marie stood over boiling vats for hours, stirring with a long iron rod. The fumes burned her throat. The acid splashed on her hands and arms, leaving burns that took weeks to heal. Her back ached from standing. Her arms ached from stirring. She lost weight. Her clothes hung loose on her frame. Pierre developed joint pain so severe he could barely walk some days. They did not stop. The storage room was not equipped for this kind of work. In summer, it was unbearably hot. The smell of chemicals was overwhelming. In winter, it was freezing. They wore coats while they worked. Their breath formed clouds in the cold air. There was no ventilation. The fumes filled the room. Marie wrote in her notebook that it was the worst condition she had ever worked in. She also wrote that she had never been happier. Why was she happy? Because she was doing something no one had ever done before. She was finding something no one knew existed. Every day brought new data. Every week brought progress. It was slow. It was difficult, but it was real. It was hers. Slowly, over months, they concentrated the radioactive material. They separated it from the other elements in the pitchblende. In July 1898, they isolated a new element. Marie named it polonium, after her homeland. It was the first time Poland appeared on the periodic table. The country that did not exist on any map now existed in science. It was a quiet act of defiance, a way of making her country visible again. But there was something else in the pitchblende, something even more radioactive than polonium. They kept working. They processed more ore. They boiled, filtered, crystallized, again and again. By the end of 1898, they had isolated another element. They named it radium. It was the most radioactive substance ever discovered. Radium glowed, not just under certain conditions. It glowed in the dark on its own constantly, a faint blue-green light. Marie and Pierre would return to the laboratory at night after dinner just to see it. They would turn off the lamps. The room would go dark. And then slowly the vials would begin to glow. Soft blue-green light on the shelves, the glass tubes shimmering. The air seemed alive with it. It was beautiful. It was mesmerizing. It was also killing them, but they did not know that yet. No one did. Radiation was new. No one understood its effects on the human body. No one knew that the glow was a warning. Marie wanted to isolate pure radium, not just detect it. That meant processing even more pitchblende. She worked alone for much of this process. Pierre was often too ill to help. His pain was getting worse. Doctors could not explain it. They said it was rheumatism or gout or nerves. They prescribed rest. Pierre ignored them. When he could not work, he lay in bed, writing letters, planning experiments, waiting for the pain to subside so he could return to the laboratory. Marie processed ton after ton of ore. She did the work of a factory laborer and a scientist at the same time. She stirred vats that weighed more than she did. She carried heavy containers across the courtyard. She poured boiling liquids through filters. She crystallized compounds in shallow trays, waiting for the water to evaporate, leaving behind concentrated salts. She never asked for help. The work was repetitive. Dissolve, boil, filter, crystallize, repeat. Each cycle took days. Each cycle removed a little more of the unwanted material and left a little more of the radium. But the radium was present in such tiny amounts that it took years to accumulate even a small sample. In 1902, after 4 years of work, she succeeded. She had isolated 1/10 of a gram of pure radium chloride. It had taken 8 tons of pitchblende. 8 tons. Processed by hand, stirred in boiling vats, filtered through paper, crystallized in trays, 1/10 of a gram. Her hands were scarred from the acid burns. Her fingertips were cracked and bleeding. Her notebooks were stained with chemicals. The pages were brittle. Years later, scientists would discover that the notebooks were so radioactive they could not be handled safely. They are still kept in lead-lined boxes. Anyone who wants to consult them must sign a waiver and wear protective clothing. But in 1902, Marie did not know any of that. She knew only that she had done it. She had proven radium existed. She had determined its atomic weight. She had isolated it in pure form. It was the hardest work she would ever do. In 1903, Marie defended her doctoral thesis. The examiners said it was the greatest contribution to science ever made in a doctoral thesis. She was the first woman in France to earn a doctorate in physics. The achievement was barely reported. The newspapers were more interested in the fact that she was a woman than in what she had discovered. One headline read, "A mother who is a doctor." Another, "Woman scientist defends thesis." They did not mention radium. They mentioned her gender. That same year, she and Pierre were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics, along with Henry Becquerel, for their work on radiation. At first, the Nobel Committee planned to award the prize only to Pierre and Becquerel. Marie was not mentioned. She had done most of the work, but she was not considered. Pierre found out. He was furious. He wrote to the committee. He told them that the research had been Marie's idea and that she had done most of the experimental work. He said he would refuse the prize if Marie was not included. The committee relented. Marie became the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. They did not attend the ceremony in Stockholm. Pierre was too ill to travel. Marie was exhausted. She was also pregnant with their second daughter. They sent a letter of thanks. They received the prize money later by mail. It was a substantial sum, more money than they had ever had. It helped, but not much. They were still living in a small apartment. They still had no permanent laboratory. The prize brought fame, but it did not bring resources. Marie hated the fame. Journalists came to their apartment. They knocked on the door at all hours. They wanted photographs. They wanted interviews. They wanted to write about the woman scientist, the wife and mother who had won a Nobel Prize. Marie refused most of them. She did not want to be a spectacle. She wanted to work. The fame brought other problems. Marie and Pierre received letters from strangers, requests for money, requests for advice, requests for samples of radium. People believed radium could cure diseases. They wanted it for their sick relatives. They wanted it for themselves. Marie answered some of the letters. She sent polite refusals. She could not give away radium. It had taken years to isolate. It was too precious. She needed it for research. Radium became famous. It was seen as a miracle substance. It glowed. It emitted energy continuously without any apparent source. It seemed to defy the laws of thermodynamics, which stated that energy could not be created from nothing. Where was the energy coming from? No one knew. It was a mystery. It was thrilling. People believed radium could cure diseases. Doctors began experimenting with it. They applied radium to tumors. They found that it destroyed cancer cells. It also destroyed healthy cells, but the cancer cells seemed more sensitive. Radiation therapy was born. It would save millions of lives in the decades to come. But radium was also sold as a cure-all. Radium water, radium toothpaste, radium suppositories, radium face cream. It was marketed as a source of vitality, a way to restore youth. Advertisements promised it would cure arthritis, impotence, fatigue, depression. People drank it. They brushed their teeth with it. They applied it to their skin. It was everywhere. Marie and Pierre did not patent the process for isolating radium. They believed scientific knowledge should be shared freely. They published their methods in detail so that anyone could replicate them. Other scientists and many businessmen used their work to produce radium commercially. Fortunes were made. Marie and Pierre made nothing. They returned to the laboratory. They could have been rich. They could have patented the process and charged royalties. They could have retired, bought a house, lived comfortably. But they did not. Marie believed that science belonged to everyone. She believed that knowledge should not be owned. It was an idealistic view. It was also impractical. They remained poor while others profited from their work. Pierre's health continued to decline. He had constant pain in his legs and back. His hands trembled. He had trouble sleeping. He had trouble concentrating. Some days he could barely get out of bed. Marie had similar symptoms, though less severe. They both suffered from extreme fatigue. Their fingertips were burned and cracked. They assumed it was from handling the chemicals. They did not connect it to the radiation. Marie had two daughters, Iron and Eve. Iron was born in 1897 before the radium work began. Eve was born in 1904 after. Marie hired help to care for them during the day, but she was present every evening. She read to them. She taught them. She took them on long walks. She kept them separate from her work. She never brought radium into the house. She was careful about that. She did not want them exposed to the chemicals. She did not know that she herself was radioactive, that her clothes, her hair, her skin were contaminated. She brought the radiation home with her every night without knowing it. In 1904, Pierre was finally given a professorship at the Sorbonne. It had taken years. He was one of the most famous scientists in France, a Nobel Prize winner, and yet he had been denied a professorship again and again. The university did not want to hire him. They said there were no positions available. They said his work was too specialized. They said he did not have enough teaching experience. The real reason was that he was difficult. He did not play politics. He did not flatter the right people. He just worked. Finally, after the Nobel Prize, they could no longer ignore him. He was given a chair in physics. Marie was appointed his chief of laboratory. It was not a real position. It came with no salary. It gave her no official status. But it gave her access to better equipment. It gave her a place. She accepted it. She had learned not to expect fairness. She had learned to take what was offered and make the best of it. They began planning a new laboratory, something larger, something with proper ventilation, proper equipment, proper space. It would take years to build. It would require funding, approvals, construction. They started the process. They drew up plans. They submitted proposals. They waited. On April 19, 1906, Pierre was walking through the streets of Paris. It was raining. The streets were crowded with carts, carriages, pedestrians. Pierre was lost in thought, distracted, walking without watching where he was going. He stepped into the street behind a stopped cart. The cart started moving. Pierre tried to step back. He slipped on the wet cobblestones. He fell. A horse-drawn wagon was coming the other way, heavy, loaded with goods. The driver shouted. Pierre tried to get up. The wagon ran over his head. He was killed instantly. Marie was at home when she was told. A colleague came to the door. He was pale, he could barely speak. He told her there had been an accident. Pierre was dead. Marie did not speak. She did not cry. She stood still. Someone brought her to the place where it happened. The body had been removed. There was blood on the stones. Marie stared at it for a long time. Then she walked home. She sent a telegram to Pierre's father. She told her daughters. Iron was 8. Eve was not yet 2. Iron cried. Eve was too young to understand. Marie did not weep in front of them. She saved that for the night alone in the bedroom she had shared with Pierre. She took out a notebook. She began to write to him. She wrote about the accident. She wrote about the funeral. She wrote about how empty the apartment felt without him. She wrote almost every day for a year. Then she stopped. The grief did not stop. She just stopped writing about it. The university offered her Pierre's professorship. She would be the first female professor at the Sorbonne. She accepted. She had no choice. She needed the income. She needed the laboratory. She needed the work. Without work, she did not know what she would do with the grief. Her first lecture was in November 1906. The amphitheater was packed. People came to see the spectacle. The widow in black, the woman in a man's position. Would she cry? Would she mention him? Would she be able to do it? Marie entered the room. She was dressed in black. She walked to the lectern. She opened her notes. She looked at the audience. She did not greet them. She did not introduce herself. She began speaking. She picked up exactly where Pierre's last lecture had ended, mid-sentence, mid-thought, as if he were still there, as if nothing had changed. The audience fell silent. She did not mention him. She did not need to. Everyone understood. She continued the radium research alone. She worked longer hours than before. She rarely slept more than 4 or 5 hours a night. She woke early. She worked late. She refused invitations to dinners, to lectures, to social gatherings. She refused interviews. She focused entirely on work and her daughters. She had always been private. Now she became unreachable. She hired a governess to help with the girls. She hired a housekeeper. She made sure the household ran smoothly, but she was distant. Anna would later write that her mother was kind but cold, that she was present but absent, that she provided everything they needed but gave very little of herself. Mara did not know how to be any other way. She had lost her mother when she was 10. She had lost Pierre when she was 38. She had learned that people leave. She had learned not to depend on them too much. She focused on isolating pure radium metal, not just radium salts. It required even more dangerous processes, even more exposure. Her health was worsening. She had ringing in her ears that never stopped. Her fingers had no feeling in the tips. She could not hold a pen for long without pain. Her eyes were getting worse. She had trouble reading. She had trouble seeing in bright light. She ignored it all. She kept working. In 1910, she succeeded. She isolated pure radium metal. It was another monumental achievement. It confirmed the atomic weight of radium beyond any doubt. It silenced the few remaining skeptics who questioned whether radium was truly a new element. Mara published the results. She received congratulations from scientists around the world. She barely acknowledged them. She was already working on the next experiment. In 1911, she was nominated for a second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for the isolation of pure radium. She should have won easily. She was the most accomplished scientist of her generation. She had discovered 2 elements. She had isolated radium. She had trained a generation of researchers. She had revolutionized our understanding of radioactivity. But something happened that almost destroyed her. Paul Langevin was a physicist. He had been a student of Pierre's. He and Mara had worked together after Pierre's death. They were close. They respected each other's work. They spent long hours in the laboratory discussing experiments, solving problems. Linjavun was married, but the marriage was unhappy. His wife was jealous. She was suspicious. She began to suspect that Mara and Linjavun were having an affair. She hired someone to follow them. She broke into Linjavun's apartment and stole letters, letters that Mara had written to him. The letters were affectionate but not explicit. They suggested intimacy, but they did not prove it. It did not matter. Linjavun's wife gave the letters to the newspapers. The scandal was immediate and vicious. The newspapers called Mara a homewrecker, a foreigner, a husband stealer, a Polish woman who had seduced a married French man. They printed excerpts from the letters. They published cartoons. They camped outside her house. They shouted at her when she left for work. They shouted at her daughters. Someone threw a stone through her window. Mara was devastated, not by the accusations. She did not care what people thought about her personal life, but by the intrusion. She had always lived in silence, in privacy. Now she was being dissected in public. Strangers were reading her private letters. Strangers were judging her. She felt exposed in a way she had never felt before. The scandal spread across Europe. Some scientists defended her. Some condemned her. Some said her personal life was irrelevant. Some said it disqualified her from scientific work. The Swedish Academy considered withdrawing her Nobel Prize. Some members argued that her personal life made her unfit to receive the prize. Others defended her. They said the prize was for scientific achievement, not personal morality. In the end, the Academy decided to award the prize, but they sent her a letter. They suggested she not attend the ceremony. They said it would be better for everyone if she stayed away. They said it would avoid further scandal. Mara was furious. She wrote back. She said she would attend. She said the prize was for her work on radium, not for her personal life. She said she had earned it. She would accept it. She went to Stockholm in December 1911. She was accompanied by her sister Brunella and her daughter Anna. She gave her lecture. She accepted the prize. She became the first person ever to win 2 Nobel Prizes. She was dignified. She was composed. She did not mention the scandal. She spoke only about radium, about isolation techniques, about atomic weights. Then she returned to Paris. She collapsed. The stress, the exhaustion, the grief, the scandal, it all caught up with her. She spent months in a sanatorium recovering. She had kidney problems. She had depression. She could barely get out of bed. Doctors told her to rest. She tried. She could not. She needed to work. Work was the only thing that made sense. Work was the only thing that did not hurt. The Radium Institute was finally built in 1914. It had taken years of planning, fundraising, negotiating. It was everything Mara had wanted. A real laboratory, modern equipment, space for students and researchers, light, ventilation, safety measures. She was appointed director. She began planning research programs. She began recruiting students. Then the war started. World War I began in August 1914. France was mobilized, men left for the front, universities emptied, laboratories closed, research stopped. Mara did not leave Paris. She stayed. She decided to help. She knew that X-rays could help doctors locate bullets and shrapnel in wounded soldiers, but X-ray machines were rare. They were large, expensive, fragile. They were only available in major hospitals in cities. Soldiers were dying on the battlefield because doctors could not find the metal fragments in their bodies in time. The fragments caused infections. The infections killed. Mara designed mobile X-ray units. She took X-ray machines and mounted them in small trucks. She added photographic darkrooms. She added generators to provide electricity. She called them petites curies, little curies. She raised money to build them. She begged for equipment. She requisitioned vehicles. She learned to drive. She was 46 years old. She had never driven before. She taught herself. She drove the trucks to the front lines. She set up X-ray equipment in field hospitals, in abandoned buildings, in tents. She trained doctors and nurses to use the machines. She took X-rays of wounded soldiers. She located bullets, shrapnel, broken bones. She worked quickly. The hospitals were overwhelmed. The wounded kept coming. There was no time to rest. She worked in field hospitals that were within range of artillery. She heard the shells exploding. She felt the ground shake. She ignored it. She focused on the work. She positioned the soldiers under the X-ray machine. She adjusted the settings. She developed the film in the darkroom. She handed the images to the surgeon. The soldier was taken to the operating table. She moved on to the next one. Anna, her daughter, was 17. She joined her mother. She learned to operate the X-ray equipment. She learned to drive the trucks. Together they traveled across the war zone, mother and daughter, working side by side, saving lives. They worked for 4 years until the war ended. They operated 20 mobile units. They took over 1 million X-rays. They saved thousands of lives. Mura never spoke about it later. She did not think it was extraordinary. She thought it was necessary. When people asked her about the war, she changed the subject. She did not like talking about herself. She did not like being praised. She had done what needed to be done. That was all. After the war, she returned to the Radium Institute. She resumed her research. She trained a generation of young scientists. She was strict. She was demanding. She expected perfection. She rarely praised anyone. She corrected mistakes immediately. She did not tolerate carelessness. Her students feared her. They also revered her. She taught them to be meticulous, to record everything, to repeat experiments until the results were consistent, to question everything, to never assume, to verify. She did not explain why these things mattered. She expected them to understand. Most did not at first, but they learned. They learned that science was not about brilliance. It was about patience, about repetition, about refusing to quit when the results did not make sense. She rarely spoke about her own work. If a student asked how she had isolated radium, she would say, "Read the papers." If they asked how she had survived the work, she would say nothing. She did not believe in talking about difficulty. She believed in working through it. The Radium Institute became one of the leading research centers in the world. Scientists came from across Europe to study there. They worked on radioactivity, on cancer treatment, on atomic structure. Mura oversaw it all. She attended every seminar. She reviewed every paper. She approved every experiment. She was present, always present, even when her health was failing. By the 1920s, radium was beginning to show its true nature. Factory workers who painted radium onto watch dials so they would glow in the dark were getting sick. They were young women mostly. They worked in factories in the United States, in Switzerland, in France. They used fine brushes to paint the numbers on watch faces. The supervisors told them to lick the brushes to keep them pointed. The radium went into their mouths, into their bodies. At first, nothing happened. The women felt fine. They liked the work. It paid well. Some of them painted their nails with the radium paint just for fun. They liked the way it glowed in the dark. They painted their teeth. They painted their faces. They went to dances and glowed under the lights. It was amusing. It was harmless, or so they thought. Then they started getting sick. Their teeth fell out. Their jaws began to disintegrate. The bone crumbled. Holes appeared in their jawbones. The doctors called it radium jaw. The women were in constant pain. They could not eat. They could not speak. Some of them died within months. Others lingered for years, their faces collapsing, their bones turning to powder. The companies denied responsibility. They said the women were lying. They said the sickness was caused by something else. Syphilis, maybe, poor hygiene, anything but radium. The women sued. The cases dragged on for years. Some of the women died before the trials ended. Eventually, some of them won. The companies were forced to pay compensation, but it was too late for most of them. Mara knew about the radium workers. She read the reports. She saw the photographs. She knew what radium could do. She had known for years. Her hands were burned. Her blood counts were abnormal. She had cataracts. She had ringing in her ears. She was tired all the time. She knew. But she continued to handle radium, often without protection. She carried test tubes of radium in her pockets. She kept samples in her desk drawer. She downplayed the risks in public because she feared people would stop funding the research. Was this irresponsible? Yes. Was it selfish? Perhaps. But Mara believed the benefits outweighed the risks. She believed that understanding radioactivity would save more lives than it would cost. She believed that knowledge was worth the price. She paid that price with her own body. She did not ask anyone else to pay it, but she also did not warn them as clearly as she could have. Her health deteriorated steadily through the 1920s. She developed cataracts in both eyes. Her vision blurred. She had trouble reading. She had trouble seeing the equipment in the laboratory. She had several surgeries to try to restore her vision. They helped, but not much. The damage was too extensive. By the early 1930s, she could barely see. She had ringing in her ears that never stopped. A high-pitched tone, constant, maddening. It made it difficult to concentrate. It made it difficult to sleep. She ignored it. She worked through it. She had always been good at ignoring discomfort. She was tired all the time, a deep bone-level exhaustion that no amount of rest could fix. She would wake up tired. She would go to bed tired. She pushed through it. She attended lectures. She supervised students. She reviewed papers. She kept working because work was the only thing she knew how to do. She had fevers, low-grade, persistent. They came and went without explanation. Her blood counts were abnormal. Her white blood cells were low. Her red blood cells were misshapen. Her blood could not clot properly. She bruised easily. Cuts took weeks to heal. Her immune system was failing. She caught every cold, every flu that passed through the laboratory. She recovered slowly. The doctors knew what was wrong. They did not say it directly, but they knew: radiation sickness, chronic exposure. The radium had been poisoning her for decades. It had settled in her bones. It was emitting radiation from inside her body, destroying her cells, attacking her bone marrow. There was no cure. There was no treatment. There was only time, and she was running out of it. Mara knew. She did not talk about it. She made plans for the institute. She trained her successor. She organized her papers. She wrote letters to colleagues advising them on experiments they should try. She acted as if she had years left. She did not. In 1934, she went to a sanatorium in the Alps. She told her daughters she needed rest. She told them the mountain air would help. She did not tell them she was dying. Anna visited her there. Mara was weak, pale, feverish. She could barely sit up. Anna asked what was wrong. Mara said it was nothing, just a cold, just exhaustion. It was not a cold. It was not exhaustion. Mara Curie died on July 4, 1934, at the age of 66. The cause of death was listed as aplastic anemia, a condition in which the bone marrow stops producing blood cells. It was caused by prolonged exposure to radiation. Her body was so radioactive it had to be buried in a lead-lined coffin. The coffin was sealed. It will remain sealed for thousands of years. She was buried next to Pier in Sa, outside Paris. The funeral was small. A few family members, a few colleagues, No government officials, no speeches, no ceremony. Mara would have wanted it that way. She had never wanted attention. She had wanted only to work quietly without interruption. She had done that. She had worked until the very end. Years later, in 1995, her remains and peers were transferred to the Panthéon in Paris, the building where France honors its greatest citizens. Mara became the first woman to be interred there on her own merits. It was a recognition she would not have cared about. She had never cared about recognition, but it mattered to others. It mattered that a woman, a foreigner, a scientist, was honored in the same place as the great men of French history. Her notebooks are still radioactive. They are kept in lead-lined boxes at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. Anyone who wants to consult them must sign a waiver acknowledging the risk. They must wear protective clothing. They can only look at the notebooks for a limited time. The notebooks will remain dangerous for another 1,500 years. That is the half-life of radium-226. That is how long it takes for half of the radiation to decay. Mara handled those notebooks with her bare hands. She wrote in them every day for years. Her laboratory equipment is radioactive. Her clothes are radioactive. Her furniture is radioactive. Even her cookbooks are radioactive. Everything she touched is contaminated. It will remain contaminated long after everyone who remembers her is dead. Her legacy is complicated. She discovered two elements, polonium and radium. She pioneered the study of radioactivity. She invented mobile X-ray units that saved thousands of lives during World War I. She founded the Radium Institute, which became the Curie Institute, one of the leading cancer research centers in the world. She trained a generation of scientists who would go on to make their own discoveries. Her daughter Anna won a Nobel Prize in Chemistry for discovering artificial radioactivity. Her other daughter, Eve, wrote Mara's biography, which introduced her mother's story to millions of readers. But her legacy is also written in the bodies of the radium workers, the women who painted watch dials and died in agony, the workers who handled radioactive materials without protection because no one told them it was dangerous. Mara knew radium was dangerous. She knew it was killing her, but she did not sound the alarm as loudly as she could have. She was afraid that if people understood the risks, they would stop funding radioactive research. She chose the research over the warning. It is a choice that haunts her legacy. Was she right? Did the benefits outweigh the costs? Radiation therapy has saved millions of lives. Our understanding of radioactivity led to nuclear medicine, to carbon dating, to nuclear energy. But it also led to nuclear weapons, to Chernobyl, to Fukushima. Mara opened a door. She could not control what came through it. No one can. What was Marie Curie like? Not the legend, not the symbol, not the first woman to win a Nobel Prize or the tragic widow or the devoted mother. What was she like as a person? People who knew her said she was kind but distant. She was generous with her time if you were a serious student. She would explain an experiment, demonstrate a technique, correct an error. But she was impatient with small talk. She did not care about pleasantries. She did not care about your feelings. She cared about your work. She was warm with her daughters but not demonstrative. She did not hug them often. She did not praise them lavishly. But she was present. She read to them every night when they were young. She took them on long walks. She taught them to think clearly, to question assumptions, to not expect the world to be fair. She prepared them for difficulty, not for happiness. After Pierre died, she was even more distant. She went through the motions of daily life, but she seemed detached. Iron would later write that her mother was like a ghost after Pierre's death, present but not really there, functioning but not living. The only time she seemed fully alive was in the laboratory with her hands in the work. She had few friends. She did not attend parties. She did not go to the theater. She did not take vacations. She worked. That was what she did. That was who she was. Work was not something she did to fill time. It was the substance of her life. Without it, she did not know who she would be. She wrote very little about herself. Her letters are factual, dry. She wrote about experiments, about results, about problems that needed solving. She did not write about her feelings. She did not philosophize. She did not speculate about the meaning of her work. She simply did the work. That was enough. There is a photograph of her taken in the laboratory around 1905. She's standing in front of a table covered with glassware. Her hair is pulled back. Her expression is calm, focused. She is not looking at the camera. She is looking at something on the table, something the photographer could not see. Her hands are blurred mid-motion. She was always moving, always working, always reaching for the next experiment. What sustained her through those years in the cold storage room? What kept her going when the work seemed endless, when her hands were burned, when her body ached, when there was no recognition, no support, no reason to believe it would work? Was it curiosity, stubbornness, a need to prove something? She never answered that question. She never wrote about her motivations. She never explained why she kept going. She just did. She showed up every day. She stirred the vats. She filtered the solutions. She recorded the data. She did not ask if it was worth it. She did not ask if it would work. She simply did the work. Perhaps that is the answer. Perhaps there was no grand motivation, no deep psychological need. Perhaps she worked because work was what she knew how to do. It was what made sense in a world that often did not. It was a way of imposing order on chaos, a way of finding truth in a world full of lies. She believed in science, not as a religion but as a method, a way of asking questions and finding answers, a way of testing ideas against reality. She believed that the universe could be understood, that its secrets could be uncovered through careful observation and rigorous experimentation. She devoted her life to that belief. She was right. The universe can be understood, but understanding comes at a price. Marie wrote in her journal in the years after Pierre died that she felt like a stranger in her own life. She went through the motions. She worked. She cared for her daughters. She attended meetings, but she felt detached, as if she were watching herself from a distance. She wrote that the only time she felt present, fully present, was in the laboratory, alone, hands in the work, mind focused. Everything else faded away. Is that peace? Is that fulfillment? Or is it escape? A way of not feeling the grief, the loneliness, the weight of a life that had become too heavy? Marie did not answer. She just kept working. Work was the only constant, the only thing that did not change, the only thing that made sense. In the laboratory, the rules were clear. You asked a question. You designed an experiment. You collected data. You analyzed the results. If the results were unclear, you repeated the experiment. If the experiment failed, you redesigned it. There was no ambiguity, no uncertainty, no grief, just the work. Outside the laboratory, life was messier. People died. They betrayed you. They misunderstood you. They judged you. They demanded things you could not give. In the laboratory, none of that mattered. In the laboratory, you were alone with the truth. Marie preferred it that way. Radium became a symbol of modernity in the 1920s and 1930s. It represented progress, the future, the triumph of science over nature. It was used in advertisements, in art, in literature. It was the glowing promise of the modern age. The idea that nature could be understood, controlled, harnessed for human benefit. Marie became a symbol too, the brave woman scientist, the the tragic widow, the devoted mother. She was used to sell radium products to promote women's education, to argue for or against women's suffrage, depending on who was doing the arguing. She hated all of it. She was not a symbol. She was a person who had worked very hard and paid a terrible price. She did not want to be used. She wanted to be left alone. She never spoke about the danger of radium in public. She was asked many times, especially after the radium workers began to die. Journalists asked her, doctors asked her, lawyers asked her. She deflected. She said the risks were exaggerated. She said the workers were careless. She said the benefits of radium in medicine far outweighed the dangers. She believed this mostly. But she also knew it was not entirely true. She carried that contradiction for the rest of her life. In private, in her journal, she admitted things she would never say in public. She admitted that she had burned her hands so many times she could no longer feel them. She admitted that she was tired, always tired in a way that sleep did not fix. She admitted that she sometimes wondered if the work had been worth it. She never answered the question. She just kept working. What does it mean to give your life to something? Not metaphorically, not in the sense of dedication or passion, but literally. To spend your body, your health, your years in pursuit of a single idea. Marie did this. She knew by the end that radium was killing her. She kept working anyway. Was that courage, or was it something else? A kind of stubbornness? A refusal to admit that the thing she had devoted her life to was also the thing destroying her? Or was it simpler than that? Was it just that she did not know how to stop? That work was the only thing that gave her life meaning, and without it, she was nothing. She did not talk about death. She did not prepare her daughters for it. She made plans for the Radium Institute. She wrote letters about experiments that would take years to complete. She acted as if she had all the time in the world. Then, one morning, she could not get out of bed. She told Iron she was tired. She told Eve she would rest for a few days. She never got up again. Her last words were about the laboratory. She asked if the radium samples were stored properly. She asked if the equipment was being maintained. She asked if the new research assistant was working out. She did not ask about herself. She did not ask for comfort. She asked about the work. Then she closed her eyes. A few hours later, she was gone. There is something haunting about the way Marie lived. Not because she was tragic, though her life had tragedy. Not because she was heroic, though her achievements were extraordinary, but because she was so focused, so relentlessly, unwaveringly focused. She wanted one thing: to understand, to know, to pull back the curtain and see what was underneath. And she did. She saw, and it killed her. Did she regret it? There is no evidence that she did. She never wrote about regret. She never expressed doubt about the path she had chosen. She worked until she could not work anymore. Then she stopped. That was all. The world remembers her as the woman who discovered radium, but radium is not the point. Radium is a fact, an element, a thing in the periodic table. What matters is the way she worked, the patience, the refusal to quit, the ability to stand in a freezing room, stirring acid, for hours, days, years, and never once ask if it was worth it. Most people need that question answered before they begin. Marie did not. She began because the question existed. She continued because the answer was not yet found. She finished because she was the kind of person who finished things. That is rare, rarer than genius, rarer than discovery. The ability to keep going when there is no reason to believe it will work. When your hands are burned and your body is failing and no one is watching and no one cares. Marie had that ability. It defined her life. It ended her life. The radiation did not stop when she died. It continued. It is still there, in her notebooks, in her clothes, in her furniture, in her bones. The things she touched are still dangerous. That is the nature of radioactivity. It does not care about intention. It does not care about genius or sacrifice. It simply is. It emits. It decays. It transforms one element into another slowly over centuries. Marie transformed too. From Maria, the Polish girl who was not allowed to learn, to Marie, the scientist who could not be ignored. From a woman the world tried to erase to a woman the world could not forget. She did not do this by demanding attention. She did this by working, by isolating radium, by proving it existed, by measuring it, nomming it, understanding it. She made herself undeniable. But in the end, she was also forgotten in small ways. People remember the discovery. They remember the Nobel Prizes. They do not remember the cold room, the acid burns, the years of labor, the nights when she could not sleep because her hands hurt too much, the way she kept going anyway. That part gets lost. It is not dramatic enough. It is not inspiring enough. It is just hard. And hardness, real hardness, is difficult to hold in the mind for long. Marie's daughter Iron followed her into science. She worked with radioactive materials. She married Frédéric Joliot, another scientist. Together they discovered artificial radioactivity. They won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1935, the year after Marie died. Iron continued her mother's work. She also died of radiation exposure, leukemia. She was 58. The same pattern repeated. The same price paid again. Did Iron know the risk? Of course she did. She worked in the same laboratory. She handled the same materials. She saw what had happened to her mother. She made the same choice her mother made. The work mattered more than the danger, or perhaps she believed, as her mother had believed, that she would be careful enough, that she would be safe enough, that the risk was worth it. She was wrong, just as her mother had been wrong. Marie's other daughter, Eve, did not become a scientist. She became a writer, a journalist, a concert pianist. She traveled the world. She lived through wars, revolutions, upheavals. She wrote her mother's biography. It was published in 1937 and became an international bestseller. It introduced Marie's story to millions of people who had never heard of her. Eve lived to be 102 years old. She died in 2007. She did not touch radium. She lived a long, full life. 2 daughters, 2 paths. One followed Marie into the glow. One stayed in the light. Both choices were valid. Both were costly in their own way. Iron gave her life to science just as her mother had. Eve gave her life to art, to memory, to preserving her mother's story. Both honored Marie in their own way. The Curie Institute still exists. It is one of the premier cancer research centers in the world. Thousands of scientists have passed through its doors. Thousands of patients have been treated there. It was built on the foundation Marie laid in that cold storage room, stirring pitchblende with an iron rod. She did not live to see it become what it is now. She saw the beginning. She saw the potential. That was enough for her. Radium is no longer used the way it was in Marie's time. It is too dangerous. There are safer alternatives now. But the work she did, the understanding she built, laid the groundwork for everything that came after. Radiation therapy, nuclear medicine, our understanding of atomic structure, the discovery of nuclear fission, the development of nuclear energy. All of it traces back in some way to that cold room where Marie and Pierre boiled pitchblende and watched it glow. Her work saved lives. It also ended lives. Hers, Iron's, the radium workers, the victims of nuclear weapons. That duality is uncomfortable. We want heroes to be simple. We want their legacies to be clean. Marie's is not. She was brilliant. She was dedicated. She was also stubborn, secretive, and willing to accept risks that should not have been accepted. She was human, flawed, complicated, real. There are moments in reading about her life when it is hard not to feel a kind of sadness, not pity. Marie would have hated pity, but sadness. for the years she spent cold, hungry, isolated, for the work that destroyed her body, for the way she was treated even after she had proven herself beyond any doubt, for the scandal, for the accusations, for the stones thrown through her window, for the fact that she had to fight for every inch of space she occupied in the world. But there are also moments of something else. Admiration, maybe, or awe, for the sheer force of will it took to do what she did. To start with nothing and end with two elements, two Nobel Prizes, a legacy that changed science forever. To be told no again and again and to keep going. To be a woman in a world that did not want women in laboratories, and to not just enter the laboratory but to become the best scientist in it. That takes something most people do not have. Marie had it. She never named it. She never spoke about it. She just used it every day until there was nothing left. In her final years, when her hands shook and her vision failed, she still went to the laboratory. She could not do the work herself anymore. Her assistants did the experiments. She watched, she advised, she corrected. She was still there, still present, still focused. Even when her body was failing, her mind was sharp. She was planning experiments she would never see completed. She was training scientists she would never see graduate. She was building something that would outlast her. She knew it. She accepted it. Marie Curie did not believe in an afterlife. She did not believe in God. She believed in the work. She believed that understanding the natural world was the highest purpose a human could have. She believed that knowledge, once discovered, could never be undiscovered, that it would persist, grow, spread, that it would outlive her. She was right. It did. The radium still glows, in laboratories, in medical equipment, in the deep places where radioactive waste is stored. It will glow for thousands of years, long after her name is forgotten, long after the notebooks have decayed, long after the last person who remembers her has died. The glow will remain, a faint blue-green light in the dark, a reminder that something was found, something was understood, something was known. Marie once wrote that nothing in life is to be feared, only understood. She wrote that in a letter late in her life to a young scientist who was afraid of failure. She told him that fear was a waste of energy, that the work was difficult enough without adding fear to it. That understanding was the only thing that mattered. She believed that. She lived that. She died knowing she had understood something no one else had. That was enough. But was it? Was it enough to spend a life in cold rooms, breathing poison, working until your hands bled, and then to die at 66, your body consumed by the thing you discovered? Was it worth it? These are the questions we ask. Marie did not ask them, or if she did, she never wrote down the answer. She left behind her work. She left behind her daughters. She left behind a legacy that is still unfolding more than 90 years after her death. She left behind the glow, and she left behind the silence. The quiet, stubborn, unshakable silence of someone who did not need the world to understand her. She only needed to understand the world, and she did. In that cold room, in the dark, alone, she did. The night is quiet now. The laboratory is empty. The vials no longer glow, or at least not where anyone can see them. The equipment has been replaced, upgraded, moved to safer rooms with better ventilation. The building where Marie worked is a museum now. People visit during the day. They take photographs. They stand in the room where she stood and try to imagine what it was like. They cannot. It is too far away, too quiet, too still. But sometimes, late at night, when the museum is closed and the lights are off, there is a sense of something. Not a presence, not a ghost, just a sense of work, of focus, of someone who was here, who gave everything, who asked for nothing, who left behind something that cannot be erased. That is Marie Curie, not the Nobel Prizes, not the fame, not the tragedy, not the symbol, just the work. The quiet, relentless, unstoppable work, and the glow, always the glow, faint, blue-green in the dark, still there, still waiting, still shining. The world moves on. New discoveries are made. New scientists emerge. Marie's name appears in textbooks, in biographies, in documentaries. She is remembered, she is honored, but the details fade. The cold room, the acid, the years of stirring, the burns, the exhaustion, the quiet determination. Those details slip away. What remains is the outline, the first woman, the 2 Nobel Prizes, the discoverer of radium. But the outline is not the truth. The truth is in the details, in the decision to keep working when there was no reason to believe it would work, in the decision to isolate pure radium even after polonium had been discovered, in the decision to return to Paris after Pierre died, to take his professorship, to continue the research alone, in the decision to drive X-ray trucks to the front lines during the war, in the decision to keep handling radium even when her hands were burned and her body was failing. Those were not easy decisions. They were not heroic decisions. They were practical decisions, necessary decisions. Mara did what needed to be done. She did not ask if it was fair. She did not ask if it was safe. She did not ask if anyone would remember. She just did it. That is the lesson, if there is one. Not that you should sacrifice yourself for your work. Not that you should ignore danger. Not that you should work until your body fails. But that you should do the work that matters to you, even when it is hard. Even when no one is watching. Even when there is no guarantee of success. You do it because it needs to be done. Because you are the one who can do it. Because not doing it is worse than doing it. Mara never wrote a memoir. She never told her story in her own words. She left behind notebooks, letters, scientific papers, factual, dry, devoid of emotion. Other people told her story. Her daughter Of wrote the biography. Journalists wrote articles. Historians wrote books. They interpreted her life. They made it meaningful. They made it inspirational. They made it tragic. But Mara herself said almost nothing. She let the work speak for her. She let the discoveries speak. She believed that was enough. And perhaps it was. Perhaps a life does not need to be explained. Perhaps it only needs to be lived, fully, completely, without compromise. She lived that way. She worked in the cold room because that was where the equipment was. She handled radium because that was what the work required. She continued after Pierre died because the research was not finished. She taught students because knowledge needed to be passed on. She drove X-ray trucks because soldiers were dying. She did what needed to be done every day until she could not do it anymore. Then she stopped. That is a life, not a story, not a legend, just a life, fully lived, completely spent, worth remembering. The glow fades, but it does not disappear. Radium has a half-life of 1,600 years. That means that in 1,600 years, half of the radium Mara isolated will have decayed into other elements. In another 1,600 years, half of what remains will decay, and so on. It will take tens of thousands of years for the radium to completely disappear, longer than recorded human history, longer than civilizations, longer than languages. Mara will be forgotten long before the radium is gone. Everyone who remembers her will die. Everyone who reads about her will die. Eventually, her name will fade from memory. The notebooks will crumble. The buildings will collapse. The Curie Institute will close. The periodic table will be rewritten, reorganized, forgotten. But the radium will still be there, still glowing, still emitting, still transforming. Is that a legacy? A substance that outlasts memory? A glow that no one sees, perhaps? Or perhaps the real legacy is not the radium, not the glow, not the Nobel Prizes. Perhaps the real legacy is the example. The quiet example of someone who worked without recognition, without safety, without certainty, and who found something true, something real, something that changed the world. That example does not need to be remembered to be powerful. It exists whether we know it or not. Somewhere, someone is working in a cold room on a problem no one cares about with no guarantee of success. Someone is choosing the work over comfort, over safety, over recognition. Someone is doing what Mara did. They probably do not know her name. They probably do not think of themselves as following her example, but they are. The work continues. It always does. Mara's hands were burned. Her notebooks are radioactive. Her body is sealed in lead. The work killed her, but the work also saved her. It gave her life meaning. It gave her purpose. It gave her a reason to keep going when everything else had been taken away. Without the work, what would she have been? A governess, a forgotten widow, a woman whose name appeared in no history books. With the work, she became Marie Curie, the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. The only person to win Nobel Prizes in two different sciences, the discoverer of polonium and radium, the founder of a research institute that still saves lives today. Was it worth it? That is the question everyone asks. It is the wrong question. Mara did not think in terms of worth. She thought in terms of necessity. The work needed to be done. She was the one who could do it, so she did it. The cost was irrelevant. The recognition was irrelevant. The danger was irrelevant. Only the work mattered. We cannot live that way. Most of us cannot. We need safety. We need comfort. We need recognition. We need to know that the work is worth the cost. Mara did not need any of that. She needed only the work. That made her extraordinary. It also made her lonely. It also made her vulnerable. It also killed her. The laboratory is quiet. The night is deep. The work is finished, or at least this part of it. The radium is isolated. The elements are named. The papers are published. The students are trained. The institute is founded. Mara's work is done. But the work itself continues, in other laboratories, other cold rooms, other hands stirring, measuring, recording. Science does not end. It accumulates. Each generation builds on the work of the previous generation. Mara built on Becquerel's discovery. Others built on hers. Anna discovered artificial radioactivity. Enrico Fermi built the first nuclear reactor. J. Robert Oppenheimer built the atomic bomb. The chain continues. Each discovery leads to another. Each answer raises new questions. Mara understood this. She knew her work was not the end. It was a step, an important step, but still just a step. She did not work for glory. She worked for understanding. She wanted to know how the world worked. She wanted to pull back the curtain and see what was underneath. She did. And what she saw was radiation, invisible, powerful, deadly, beautiful. She spent her life studying it. She died from it. She never regretted it. Or if she did, she never said so. She simply did the work, day after day, year after year, until there was nothing left. Then she stopped. That is all. That is everything. Sleep now. The story is over. The work is done. The radium glows faintly in the dark in places no one visits, in lead-lined boxes in the bones of the earth. Mara is gone. Pierre is gone. Anna is gone. The students are gone. The cold room is a museum. The equipment is behind glass. The notebooks are sealed away. But the work continues. Somewhere, always, someone is stirring a solution. Someone is recording data. Someone is isolating something new. Someone is working in the cold, in the dark, with burned hands and tired eyes. Someone is choosing the work over everything else. Someone is becoming what Mara was, quiet, focused, undeniable. The night deepens, the glow fades, but it never disappears. It is always there. Waiting, patient, like Mara, like the work, like everything that matters, still there, still waiting, still glowing softly in the dark.